Chapter 9. The train slowed and stopped, and from atop the carriages, from the boxes under them, jumped, rolled, crawled scores of children, ignoring the shouting guards, laughing at them and at the regular passengers who regarded their blackened faces and sooty rags with disgust and fear. Ivan and Kostya sat on the embankment and started to peel off one layer of rags, taking with it some of the soot and leaving a slightly less filthy layer beneath. Alex removed his jacket and shook it out. Soot rose from it as from the engine. "Where's Anya?" Alex asked anxiously. Though he had volunteered her care, they all seemed to share it without question. She was seen close by picking pale greenish yellow shoots and arranging them in a nosegay, stuffing every other one into her mouth. "Will we go to the hills?" Ivan asked Peter, "or stay near the river?" "I think we'll go to the caves," Peter said. "It is so early in the year, probably not too many others have come yet." Usually Peter won't let us stay with the other bands in the caves because of their sickness and other things, Kostya said. "But I stayed in the caves once before I met Peter. There were hundreds of children in our cave." The bosses are older boys, too old for the bands, really, and you give part of everything to them. Most of everything. "Part of what? What you find every day?" Alex asked. "Yes, that too, but they taught us in the mountain trails, and we smuggled all kinds of things for the big bosses, men from the towns. There are thousands of children up here in the summer, thousands and thousands. They own the mountains." Somehow, the children of the various bands reformed into their own groups and took off in various directions, running along the roads, shedding rags like feathers on the way. "First we'll eat," Peter said, "then we will find a place to stay." "Let's go to the market then," Boris said. "No," Peter said, "it'll be slow work to get enough down there. We'll have to go out to the fields." "But it's early," Boris complained. "There'll be nothing to see. We'll have to dig." "That won't hurt you," Kostya said. "Peter's right. We could cut out 100 pockets there and not find enough for bread." "If there's bread to buy," Peter said. So they took off over the interlaced fence into the fields, still hard from the winter frost, giving up the odor of earth that Alex had almost forgotten. Now it reached his senses with such an impact that they were confused and communicated that this was something to eat. He salivated. Anya picked up some of the soil and chewed it. Her little face, full of soot, now became frosted with mud. When Alex said, "Ugh," she was unabashed. "This is very good earth," she said. "There are even some good worms." Alex gagged. The field stretched before them now, row upon furrowed row, with faint touches of green in some places. They raced to these spots and began to pick the green tops of unknown plants, eating them ravenously. "Be careful," Peter warned. "Your belly can ache a lot from that. It is better to dig the roots." "My belly aches so much now, a little more won't matter," Ivan said. "Here, this looks right," Peter said, and began to dig with his hands and the tip of a little stick. "This is what we want." He pulled from the ground a small tuber, the awakening roots of this year's crop of potatoes. One by one, the children abandoned the greens and turned to burrowing animals, down on their hands and knees, throwing the dirt behind them, discovering, devouring the roots. Before they had eaten their fill, a man on a limping horse came shouting towards them, waving a whip, and urging barking dogs to attack. "Urchins, scavengers, destroyers of crops, away, away!" The children flew across the fields, jumped down into a trench separating the field from the roads, and ran a distance, doubled over to hide themselves from the angry kulak. They lay in the trench laughing and munching the last of the roots until he disappeared, howling curses to the empty field. Although the wind blew cold, the absence of snow was a gift, and Alex felt almost comfortable, almost hopeful. Now, he thought, although they would have to scrounge more for food, and perhaps could not eat much more of these greens, they were better off than in Moscow when they were freezing and would soon have starved. Well, then, they would stay here in the south and warm themselves up, feed their empty bellies, and then. Alex found a blank when he tried to think ahead. There seemed to only be the present. Between now and the future there hung a great dark curtain that he could not see through or around. He allowed himself to imagine going back home to Kovrov and finding his father, mother, sister, and grandmother waiting for him. "Where have you been, Alex? We missed you. Sit down for supper." And they'd bring out boiled meat surrounded with vegetables and a rich gravy, and a sweet cake filled with preserves. Could that be the future? They started to climb up the rocky hill where once flocks had roamed. They don't dare to pasture the sheep and goats anymore, Boris said. They know we'd take them all. How would you like a nice roast leg of lamb? Of young spring lamb now, eh? Not me, Miska said in a mournful voice. I'm not hungry. Everyone laughed. Alex was surprised by the cave. It was so big. He had thought of the kind of little cave he had found when he was in the woods with old Toka. Peter told them to stay well back of him. He entered by himself and approached a boy near the first fire. Which one is the chief? He asked. Who are you to ask? The boy said, looking up sleepy eyed, dragging his head back and looking through slitted eyes. Alex knew this kind of face. Boris had this look. These people came from Mongolia. They had an oriental cast to their features, just one of many groups of Russians. It made them look slow, but they were not. I'm Peter. I'm head of this band. We have just come from Moscow and we want to stay here tonight. Tomorrow we will look for our own shelter. The boy grunted. He was chewing a piece of strange flat bread that Alex had not seen before. There's still room, the slit-eyed boy said. But we have first rates to everything. You will have to wait your turn. Rights to what? Alex whispered. Water, for one thing, Ivan said. There's a stream. He pointed, and Alex could see many boys and a few girls lined up with bowls and small tins. Peter won't let us drink it without boiling anyway, Kostya said, because they foul it, and many of them are sick. Peter herded the group into a corner away from the others, who seemed to hang like bats from the walls or basked in front of the smoky fires. Resting now, Alex watched the other bands. For the most part, they were a surly bunch, but he thought we were no group of gentlemen ourselves. Many fights were going on. Some were picking fleas from one another. Some were sharpening little homemade knives on stones. Many were scabby, some twisted and swollen. Stay away from them, Peter warned. But despite the warning, Alex noticed Boris and Grigory in conversation with the Mongolian boy. Sleep came in this strange place as naturally as in any other. In the morning, Boris was gone. So was Grigory. But they arrived back while the rest of the band was preparing to leave. Where have you been? Peter asked. We almost left without you. What business is it of yours? Boris asked, even more surly than usual. You know what business it is of mine, Peter said. Where were you? Alex thought. He saw Boris exchange warning looks with the Mongolian. Did he imagine it? I was getting water. Where's the water? Peter challenged. I drank it. You know we boil water here. That's your business too, Boris said. Why is Peter grilling him like that? Alex asked Kostya. Because those boys are in the drug traffic, Kostya answered. Peter doesn't betray them, but he won't let his band work for them. A boy from one of the other bands had just brought a basin of water to the Mongolian and was now wrapping his feet in rags for him. Look at that Savoloch, Ivan whispered. He's got himself a slave. He probably won him playing cards, Kostya said matter-of-factly. Miska's belly was giving him a terrible pain. It's like last year, Peter said. You eat too much. You'll have to stay here while we go into town. Miska whimpered and doubled up on his side. They followed Peter down the hill past peasant cottages and little farms. As they approached the town, Alex could see through open doorways and mica windows of the cottages. They were furnished with only simple benches, a table, a stove. Goat skins hung up from nails, dried flowers from the rafters. In one, a muzhik slept on the stove. But this was the first time since leaving Kovrov that Alex had been in a homely town, and he felt a deep longing. It was surprising to see the town so crowded. Alex had expected the small town emptiness, but the streets were thronged with poor people in colorful costumes, the men long bearded, the women wearing striped aprons, heavy skirts, and babushkas, the scarves. Many urchins thronged the streets begging. Open trucks of soldiers passed frequently. Stanik, wandering holy men in long robes, prayed and asked for alms. Alex was walking beside Ivan. This is where I opened my shop, Ivan said. Alex laughed. But then as he watched, Ivan spread a rag upon the ground, and in it dropped 2 kopecks. Then he put down his head between his feet, and suddenly his feet shot into the air, and he was standing on his head. Then he started to hum a bright tune. Now Alex was laughing so hard he couldn't stop. It felt good. Several passers-by stopped and looked at Ivan. Now he started rotating, pushing himself around with his hands, nearly spinning on his head. Then he lowered his legs forward, then backward, then one forward, then one back. Then with a push, he propelled himself to his feet. The people clapped and smiled. Ivan bowed deeply. A man threw a kopeck into the rag. See, Ivan complained. That's the South for you. 1 kopeck. Nobody has any money here. They deal in goods. Barter. It's okay if they throw me a loaf of bread, but they won't do that. You have to be a businessman to work this market. And indeed, around them was a busy marketplace with people making small deals in all corners. An old man traded a leather purse for a beard comb made of palm. A piece of cloth was traded for an old cabbage. A little commerce that was done was taught on the abacus. But nowhere were seen the stands of fruits and vegetables that had once been seen in Moscow. Alex thought this was a little strange, since this is the South where all the good things grew. The drought, Ivan said. They lost their crops in the drought. I think we can starve here almost as well as we can in Moscow. At least we won't be cold doing it, Alex said, with a touch of the carefree Brez Prizroni spirit that he was beginning to feel from time to time. A feeling that what is. Ivan was standing on his head again, spinning like a top. What can I do? Alex said. I don't know how to stand on my head. You be the caller, Ivan said. Say, come see the human spinning top. Come and see the human top, Alex called. Come and see the circus kid, star of the Moscow circus, he improvised. Ivan laughed, and several people stopped and watched him whirling his legs, turning like a drunken windmill. This time, 2 kopecks landed on the rug. Ivan folded himself up and rolled around like a rubber ball. Then he flattened himself out on the sidewalk and relaxed. The crowd dispersed. Do you know what I am doing? He asked Alex. I'll tell you. I am giving free entertainment to these kulaks and muziks who are eating a meal every day. I, Ivan, am giving charity. I am a philanthropist. He got up, picked up the kopecks, and pulled Alex into the crowd. Nearby, an organ grinder was doing a little business with his parrot. For a kopeck, the drowsy bird would pick a fortune from a pack the man held. For 5 kopecks, the parrot would perform tricks, as the man kept announcing, but for that service there were no takers. I don't need a parrot to tell me my fortune, Ivan said. Steal or starve, that's it. Now they saw Peter making his way towards them. He was moving swiftly. Let's go, he hissed, and Ivan and Alex whirled in their paths and followed. Behind them in the crowd, 2 policemen were craning their necks. Don't look back, Peter said. They're after me. They just don't know it because they didn't see my face. What did you get? Alex puffed, trying to keep up. Bread from the government store. You stole from the government store? Ivan exclaimed. What gal, he laughed. What else can you do in this place? Back in the cave, Peter threw a loaf of bread to the Mongolian boy, who was sitting at the entrance to be sure he got shares of everything coming into the cave. Miska, wrapped up in himself like a snail, was still sleeping. Get up, Peter said, prodding him gently. Follow me. Miska stumbled to his feet. My stomach still hurts very much, he said. He looked pale, and dark circles made his eyes appear to sink way into his head. Never mind now. Come on. They left the cave and climbed farther up the hill. Kostya carried Miska when he fell far behind. Anya climbed like a little mouse on all fours. Where are we going? Alex asked. And why are we going? Higher up, Peter said, because we don't want to tangle with that crowd in the cave. I don't like their kind. They're not to be trusted. You're a lot of fools, Boris growled. There's plenty of money to be had there. Do you think these boys in the cave are starving? Didn't you smell their soup last night? Didn't you see sausages hanging in the back of the cave? We are going to have some soup ourselves, Peter announced. Kostya and Leon have been out digging roots. The small boys have been getting grass and twigs for a fire. They settled under a small outcropping of rocks, more like the caves Alex knew in the hills of his home. This is nothing compared to the big cave, Boris complained. It's a big climb, and when you get here, what have you got? He spat. Peter said nothing, but the tension between him and Boris was growing, and it made the rest of them uneasy. Peter immediately set water to boil and made herb tea for Miska and one of the other boys who was complaining of bellyache. Miska curled up in the corner of the cave and stayed that way, whimpering from time to time. Each day they went to the town, and Ivan continued to do his whirling act while others stole small combs and pieces of leather, reselling them for a few kopecks. It was not like Moscow. You could not steal in one market and sell in another. Twice Peter made successful forays into the government store, returning to the cave with his shirt full of bread. Boris and Grigory became more and more sullen. At night, Alex saw them slip out of the cave more than once, returning in the morning, laughing, punching each other. Then, one morning, Peter caught them returning, reeling with drink. All right, Peter said, this is the end. You must choose to stay with this band and keep its rules, or go with your new friends and stay with them. No more coming and going. Do you understand? How can you be so stupid? Boris shouted. Don't you know that for taking a little cocaine over the mountains, you can have enough money to buy your bread from the government store and more? We have had sausage. We have had potatoes. Yes, we are no fools, my friend Grigory and I. We are professionals. Well, then, Peter said almost sadly, you will have to do your business elsewhere. Goodbye, Boris. Goodbye, Grigory. It's time I went anyways, Boris said. I'm tired of hanging around with a bunch of children. We're going to where there are grown men. Come on, Grigory. Grigory followed Boris obediently as he started down the hill. Alex thought Grigory looked doubtful, yet he knew he would go with Boris. He was like a shadow with almost no thoughts of his own. The morning ritual began almost as if they were back in the bakery cellar in Moscow. Some boys tended the fire, one was in charge of cutting the bread into equal shares, and as usual, the youngest boys were out gathering fuel for the fire. Anya usually went with the small boys to help as she could. When they were just finishing the morning chores, when Kostya spied Boris just below their ledge. Look, there's Boris, he said. He's come back. Perhaps he's not so crazy about his new friends after all. Where? Alex said. I don't see him. He was right there a minute ago, Kostya said. I could see him waving his arm to Grigory. Shall we take him back to Peter? Leon asked. Why not? Should we take him back, Peter? Leon asked. Why not, Peter said, if he can live as the rest of us do. Just then, when Boris's head had been, two strange heads appeared, and then their bodies, two policemen from the village. Don't move, they shouted. All right, one said as he approached. We know who the robber is, the tall one. Stand up. They approached Peter. So you think you can steal from the government store and get away with it? They laughed. Not when you run with scum like this who will turn you in. These boys did not steal, Peter said. They did not turn me in either. I think I know who did. Anyhow, you've got me, but you've nothing against these boys except they're homeless like half the country. Don't tell us our duty, shouted one of the policemen. We are told you're a bunch of smugglers as well. On your feet, all of you. At least there will be a few less of you villains running around the town. Where will they take us? Alex whispered nervously to Ivan. Not to heaven, Ivan said.